about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm one of your hosts, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by.
Kristen Sowers, also known as Seventh Mastery.
And this time, I'm pretty sure my microphone's set correctly. Sorry
Yeah, it
about
sounds
that last
great.
week,
No,
gang.
it sounds great. It's good.
But that actually is on theme for tonight's episode. Before we talk about what we've been up to, tonight's topic will be the mistakes we've made along the way.
So
you don't
many.
have to.
So many mistakes. Please learn from the cautionary tale that I am.
Yeah. The thing is to understand that me and Kristen both got started into the 3D printing right around the renaissance that is the emergence of resin 3D printing. And boy, howdy, did the stuff that is common knowledge now was not common knowledge back when we were first making these decisions.
Very true.
And while I still stick by my affirmation that 3D printing is nowhere near as hard as you think it is, if you've not experienced it, it is. There are some fun ways to screw things up.
And so many. And some
most
of them
will not brick your printer.
Most of them, but we will talk about a couple that do.
This actually isn't. So this is just a celebration of hilarity. And it's not. Think of this as like you're watching America's Funniest Home Videos, and me and Kristen are about to get hit in the nuts with wiffle ball bats.
It's true. Wow, we said nuts. We're getting ricey. Mm-hmm. All right.
But before we jump into our mistakes, anything you want to celebrate about accomplishments in 3D printing or cool gaming stuff?
Gaming stuff.
What you been up to?
Well, I've started 3 new D&D games recently because, I entered my big, massive cross Pathfinder game, so I had to. I did also lose my Fabio Ultimate game, which was a little sad, but I do have the Argia games. If you're familiar with my stuff on TikTok, I have been running a interwoven series of one-shots that a magical tree mark appears like a tattoo on your arm, and it connects you to other people, other heroes throughout the multiverse who are willing to respond to calls for help. So basically we can have characters from every campaign setting. We can have characters from, any sort of era you want. And we're combining content from the Magic the Gathering books and all the campaign settings. And that's been really, really cool. And that's some of the stuff I do run that sometimes physically. I ran my original game of that was physical, but it was actually for 3.5 a long time ago. But as this has been growing, I've been adding some more semi-regular things where maybe some things interrupt that story and then like create a more permanent or semi-permanent game. And because of that, there's just a lot more interaction in those games, and people can guest star from different games, and there's a lot of crossover potential. Really, really just a fun vibe in general. So I've been running all those and printing some stuff for them. But actually what I ended up going back to that I think spawned tonight's episode is I had a weird lark to revisit the I Can't Believe It's Not Sylvaneth army that I started a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. It's been a while since you've talked about that.
Yeah. And I did a dumb.
Oh, no.
And got all excited, set up the tray, and this is one of the things we'll be talking about tonight too. Loaded my tray to like tilt, of course, my plate. It was like, it wasn't full like multi-level stacks, right? But it was like no real estate unclaimed, right? Like
if it full completion build,
yeah, like almost edge to edge, right? As much as I comfortably dared push it. And it was beautiful, and there's that sense of satisfaction when you're looking in your setup and you're looking at the files all like rafted and everything looks great, and you have like that moment, right? And you're like, yeah, I nailed this. There's no collision. It's gonna print beautifully. It's gonna be great. And I didn't tighten the plate screw.
Oh no, that is a mistake I have also made in the past.
And it's a basic like first day mistake, right? If you're not familiar with this process with resin, your plate is dropping down, it's getting the layers of the cured resin building up, and it just creates this 3D thing as it goes down, and each little layer stacks up. And if you don't have your plate tight, it vibrates and it shakes.
Yep.
And so you get inconsistencies in the layers, you get things that don't line up correctly, and you will just have, I have to say, it was almost like surrealist art project bad, like how weird it looked. and it almost would have worked for like some sort of like planar nightmare trees, but
Mhm.
like it was too unstable and they were just going to break and be fragile. And it was just a situation where I was like, I know better than this. Why was I just rushing? I was rushing. I had other things I wanted to do, and like so I was like, okay, I just need to get this set and go and hit print and go. And one of the reasons I was printing trees is I think trees and terrain are, even like bit terrain, very fast paint jobs that look fantastic, right? So I just
absolutely.
I wanted that win, right? I wanted that
Mhm.
fast, satisfying win, printing up some trees, printing up some like broken wall bits, and just like nice stuff to flush out any board. Would have worked for wargaming, would have worked for D&D. And I was like, such a great job. I was so satisfied with that. Nah. Didn't have the screw tightened, and pure chaos, failure, and destruction.
Oh, that reminds me of one of my earlier terrain fails.
Yeah.
And it's kind of related to what I did this week, though I didn't
Mm.
have the fails this week. So, to put things in context, what
Okay.
I've been up to in gaming lately this week is a younger sibling and me have been watching a lot of like Magic Craft and
Okay.
like
Yeah.
fun, cool, like get all crafty and make your terrain stuff.
Yeah.
And like, there's still placing that in my heart. I've got a Proxon, I've got
Yeah.
but we wanted to go old school with this, so it was cereal boxes
Oh,
and dollar store foam core for
I mean, you can make some fantastic buildings with that stuff.
absolutely you can. So I broke out my texture rollers, and that's
Uh-huh.
I'll get to the fail in a moment. It has to do with those texture rollers.
Uh-huh.
And but there's certain aspects of this that are more annoying than others.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is annoying is consistently making windows and doors.
Yes.
And
Very
so
true.
much so that you can go out online at any point in time and just buy windows and doors for use in builds like this.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what else you can do? You can just 3D print those.
Yes. Yes, you can.
Yes. So I've been like looking for cool greeblies and windows and just breaking out Blender and making my own and all sorts of fun stuff again. And it's like I really love it. Like there's nothing more satisfying than opening up Blender, making something in your head happen on Blender, and then an hour later you're holding it in your hand because these things print real fast.
I even get that just from kit bashing, where I'm just like, these two things did not look like they would go together, but I made them go together and I did a good job. And that is a very satisfying moment. So even if you are new to the hobby, you can have that moment. And speaking of having people in the hobby, we have Floopy, we have Troy, David, James. We do, when we do these shows live, have a stream audience. So if you ever want to come hang out with us, you can.
And you get to ask us questions all throughout the show, and we will do it. And if we're doing an interview, you get to ask the questions to the interviewee.
It's true. I'm trying to get Cobra Mode back on here. Hopefully.
Oh yeah, we'd love to talk with Cobra Mode again.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in being on the show, drop us a line.
Indeed. So, failure.
One of the cool things that you can use to do these things and make it easy are texture rollers. Now you can buy these from certain companies, and certain companies that I don't like to support because they do scummy things.
True.
Sell them. But you can just 3D print these. There's so many of these out there for you 3D. And ironically, I do recommend printing these in resin. You can stand them right up on the build plate, end down, and just print the whole thing. And they're hollowed out so that you don't have a problem with that.
Right.
Boom, 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 boom. Perfectly detailed. I've printed a bunch of these like that. They're wonderful. Wonderful.
Cool. That is very, very cool.
And you've just put a little bit more pressure on these, and it will indent into dollar store foam core or XPS foam insulation. And of course, if you want to do clay to cover your terrain, these also work wonderful in clay. They're fantastic for bases. Absolutely fantastic for bases. But I got really ambitious the first time I printed these. And I loaded up my Mars and I put all the goo in the build plate. And I put 8 of these on my plate. And you know what I ended up getting? About 1 inch of roller, because these things take a lot of resin to print.
Oh no!
One solid tube of goo.
So you just didn't have enough resin in there. You didn't notice, and
So that is one of the classic goofs, is to make sure that you all have enough goo in your vat.
Yes.
Just figure out how much goo's in your vat. The modern printers have like a little gauge on the side. I saw that on my Ultra, and I was just like, blew my dang mind. It says, "Oh, I've got 300 milliliters left," and
Yeah.
then you can check on your slicer. It'll tell you you've got.
Will
Is
it
this print's going to
stop?
take? No, it won't.
Okay, okay.
There are
'Cause
printers now that do.
I
Some
was
of
about to
these, like the
say,
GTK Ultras, can.
well, and
The
the FDM printers
Uniformations
will
can.
often.
Yeah, the FDM printers, they have sensor runout. Not all of them. They have to have They have to have filament runout sensors, and that's a
Right.
relatively new addition to a lot of printers.
Troy's
but just
asking
like-
if you're from the mirror universe and evil because your shirt's backwards.
I need to. I'll find the button to flip that sometime later, y'all. Sorry about that.
No, it's funny. And David wants to play chicken with the resin or the FDM stuff.
Don't do that, y'all. Just figure out how much goo's in your plate. Look at how much it's going to take to do the print. It's a mistake I made real early on. It usually doesn't have any downside other than you just wasted a whole bunch of goo. But
yeah.
like this is just it's just not fun when you're like, oh, because like these. The first time I did this was actually on my old Mars, my original Mars. So like this was like a 12-hour print, and I was like 12 hours later, waking up, coming in there in the morning to check out my new whole vat of texture rollers, and sadness.
I mean, I do that a lot, right? You go to you have the Christmas morning moment where you set up the print job at like midnight or 1 a.m, and then you run back in, and it's too late, Kristen. I already have one twice. Actually, I have two, David. I have done this resin chicken game. I've done it before. And my advice specifically to do this is, you need to make sure that you do it like carefully and as you're still in progress. I have had one where I've let it go and let it stop and tried to get it like to match again, and just don't do that. You're gonna have a bad time.
I think there's another mistake is to assume that your resin prints are precious. And I don't mean when they're finished, but like, don't misprints, just let them go.
Yeah.
Don't jump through too many hoops. Don't try to do this. Like, understand that when you're first getting started, you think, the time is super valuable. The resin costs money, but really we're talking about pennies and dollars here.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, gosh, have you seen the GW prices for the new Bretonnians? $60 for 3 horsies.
It's just ridiculous. I don't even want to talk about the old world stuff. It's just like, it is literally now just, we've been talking about this in my streams over on TikTok too. Mm-hmm. The dollar price tag for nostalgia, right? Like they're hitting people who are aging and trying to reclaim their glory days, and they are charging people through the nose, and it's kind of gross. So
but it's just like, this dragon is like $7 worth of resin.
Yep.
And this dragon took a lot of print time, even on the Saturn, because it's a big boy. He's a big boy.
He's a big boy.
This took like 7 hours to print this dragon.
Yeah. Well, and is he one piece?
No, he's the head and wings are separate.
Gotcha. Okay. So still pretty big body though.
Yeah. But just do the reprint, clean the printer, do the reprint, make those failed prints. Just, if you have to use them for anything, they make great basing bits, but I really just recommend you just throw them away.
Yeah. I mean, you can salvage stuff into terrain, etc. But like, there is something to be said for the catharsis of just like, nope, take your plate over. That's what I did today. Went right over the garbage and just scraped that puppy off. And was just like, this is a mistake. I'm going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to just get rid of it. I don't need it anymore, because I have boxes, like, speaking of my FDM prints, and we'll talk about some of those mistakes in a second, but like my FDM prints that I got like 90% of the way done.
Oh no.
And I'm like,
those are the worst because they look so
can't
good.
throw this way. And I can with, again, some dollar store foam core, I could probably finish out the buildings and make them look fantastic. And so those are probably worth keeping, but there is that like moment of like, but then I look at them and I see the failure and I'm just like, I don't like that. But there's going to be those moments of just like, let's just let it go. Just scrape it off, let it go.
And let's also revisit my most spectacular of all failures, since we're talking about screws.
Okay.
So, fun thing. Brand new Elegoo Saturn. Still getting used to this printer.
Yes.
You didn't screw down the build plate. I didn't screw down the vat.
Ooh.
Full Elegoo Saturn vat. Was planning on printing, ironically enough, another dragon.
Uh-huh.
And it was like big long print, so I had to have lots of goo in the chamber. And I come back and I see my build plate still filled with goo 10 inches off the ground, and I proceed to become instantly stupider as I start to think about how to handle this situation. And there was a correct way to handle this situation because I forgot to screw that build plate down.
Let it go back down.
Oh, that would be great. So the correct answer is to secure the vat, like put your hands under the vat to hold it, and then unscrew the build plate, pull it away from the printer, and then deal with your situation.
Yeah, sure, that would work.
Yeah, no, but I was instantly stupid at that point in time. So I was like, this will be a lot easier to deal with, and I won't spill things if I try to empty the vat of goo first.
Oh dear.
So I get my little goo cup and I start pouring goo out, and then the printer just goes drop.
Yeah,
the vat hits the printer.
Imagine. That's horrifying.
Resin splashes everywhere.
Oh,
my entire arm up to my shoulder is covered in thick goo.
Oh no.
Everything's covered in resin.
Yeah.
I immediately have to like destroy like 2 whole rolls of paper towels, and I'm sitting here doing the timer.
Right.
Because like I have 10 minutes to get this done before I start having adverse reactions.
Right.
So I get as much cleaned up as possible, then immediately run into a shower.
Yeah.
And then I got some in my eye.
I've done it.
That is the worst. Wear eye protection, y'all. Yeah. Resin splash in your eyes is incredibly painful.
It's not fun. Troy said, "Do you remember your screen protector?"
Oh no.
And I think it's time. We haven't had a recounting of the story for some time, but in a similar debacle.
This is the reason it's our tagline of the show, y'all.
Yes. I am a brand new, hyper enthusiastic, hyper fixated, spicy brained 3D printer. Super excited. I am printing like a madman. I think I've gone through, I have set up the thing in the garage at the time. Was super excited. I think I'd printed through like 5 or 6 bottles of resin in those first couple months, at least, just going nuts, and did not realize a couple things. I'm going to say the first thing I didn't realize, over curing your resin can make it brittle and sharp, especially if you're using transparent resin. So if you don't know this, please know that. Sharp and brittle resin, when you're peeling it or popping it off things, or even when it comes off your FEP, especially those first generation ones, can damage your FEP, and it can slice and dice it. And then you have a perforated FEP. And this is where we get really scary, because if you are getting a modern printer, most of them have the screen protectors built in now, or will advise you to do it.
Or they have glass on the
Sure. Or have some of the things. But back in the day, your vat went right onto your LCD, right? Like it was right
with
there.
With a polarizing clear layer that damages super easily.
Super easy. You can, even a single scrape of your fairly benign plastic spatula can do it dirty. Certainly your metal one you're using. So when you perforate your FEP and you lift it off, that just rips. As a kid, I was jumping on a trampoline that was really old, and the whole thing just split along this sprint seam line and dropped me right on the ground.
This was much more disastrous than I thought it was.
It was just like that, except for it splits open and resin just pours out through the bottom of my perforated FEP. It goes everywhere. First time I've ever had resin spill. I barely know anything about the safety at this point. It's going over the sides of my printer, running down into open vents. It's going everywhere, and I just freak out. I'm also in the garage trying to work with ventilation, and sunlight starts getting in here. So I have curing resin. I have resin all over in every groove and crevice. I have the stuff that perforated and baked onto it and is now like stuck to the FEP. As I'm trying to rip the thing off, it just keeps ripping wider. The resin's going everywhere. You can imagine I am like freaking out. And I go and I do the same sort of thing you do. I'm like getting the paper towel pile, just getting everything, alcohol everywhere, trying to wipe it all down, seeing that there's stuff baked onto to the LCD. And I'm like, I've got to get that off now. It won't get any better. And I bust out that razor sharp, really nice scraper I bought to pop the prints off the plate. And I just shred into that LCD, like destroy it, right? Like this is like done, right? Ruin that printer pretty much entirely. I mean, at this point, resin's probably gone inside it also, right? Like God knows what's happened to that, especially as it's been hit and cured possibly. And all of this could have been stopped with two things. One, not knowing that the resin could damage the FEP at all, which I did not know. And I did not know it could be over cured. I did not know it could be stuck too hard, et cetera, et cetera. But two, having a screen protector there, not only to cover, the LCD, which is fragile and vulnerable, et cetera, but also to cover the grooves that are going to fill with resin and get like, and you don't want to cover your vents because that's a heat issue. But like there are parts of the build plate and stuff that not build plate, the base, the surface of your printer that are vulnerable to at least getting that stuff in there. And usually you can get it out and it's not a big deal, but like, please just use a screen protector or make sure you get a printer that has a built-in like glass layer or anything at this point. That was a huge, like almost like hobby ending debacle for me because I was out several $100. It had been like the most exciting thing I'd got in my life for like, at least a couple of years, maybe longer. I was so happy with it and I was just printing minis like a madman. But yeah, just that screen protector would have saved me hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So that is where the tagline comes from.
So $5 piece of plastic between the vat and your screen. You throw it away when something like this happens, and you have no troubles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had a screen protector on mine. That's why it lived.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'd be saying a very similar story than Kristen's here.
Yeah. And that is also the follow-up story of Anycubic and why I now get Elegoo. I'm not going to throw Anycubic under the bus. I am more than willing. I gave them a second chance with FDM also, but that's a different story that we'll get to probably in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy, and oh goodness. So another kind of very common fail that you can run into with 3D printing that doesn't involve spilling resin all over yourselves. Boy, hollow prints, they need ventilation holes in them.
Oh, yes. If you don't know this, folks, if you're printing resin, if it can't get inside to cure it, it stays liquid.
Yeah. So let's say you want to print a giant elephant for your storm giant to ride.
Theoretically.
And, if you print it solid, that's a bad idea because first you're going to use up a ton of resin that you don't need to use.
Don't need to use it. It's also going to make
suction force is going to be so hard to print that cross section of a giant elephant that takes up your whole printer. It's just going to be a bad time. So the smart thing to do is your plate. Yeah, the smart thing to do is to hollow it. Yeah. Kind of put a hole there so that the resin comes out of the hollow space. Because if you don't, well, a few weeks down the road, or really a couple of months down the road, it takes a little while. That resin's going to slowly be liquid inside there. It's going to start giving off gases, and it's going to start eating away at the inside of your print. And eventually you're going to hear a strange popping noise coming from your miniature shelf. And then you're going to go look and you're going to, why is there suddenly mint green goo all over my miniature shelf? And if your miniature shelf is in direct sunlight, the elephant's not the only thing that you painted and were real proud of that's no longer useful because it exploded from the inside out.
Yeah.
But so is the cleric next to it that is now covered in a permanent layer of mint green nastiness.
Yeah, that tracks.
And all you have to do is every slicer ever that lets you hollow your miniatures will have a little tool that will put
Punch a
a
hole.
drain hole in, and you want to put 2 into each chamber
Because
so
vacuum
that
is a thing.
yeah, and that way air can come in while the goop comes out, and if you wash it out good, you actually usually like the ultimate thing is like get in there with a light and shine it light in there to get the UV in there. But really, if you just wash it out really, really, really well, you won't need to do that.
Probably not. I mean, you
Yeah.
still might have a little bit of liquid goo in there, so you should be careful with how you base it. But yeah,
Right.
and
But,
get it good and dry if you can.
Yeah, and also if another potential solution there is to water cure, because the water cure will cause the UV light to reflect through the water and cure the inside as well as the outside.
But don't leave your prints in that water cure too long.
Not long term.
I have made that mistake too. I didn't even put that on my list. That's a fun one though. But
Speaking
back
of
to
which, I'll go
back
for
to
you're next. You're next.
No, I want to follow up to your punch a hole situation really quick. 2 things about this that we didn't quite touch on yet. 1, you also have to orient the miniature in a way that it will drain. So if you do your punched holes and don't put them in the right direction, that's still going to be chock full of goo, and you might have a bad time, especially because now it has holes to dump it out when you turn it. So pay attention to that. Might have happened.
There's not a wrong answer there. You just need to be aware of it.
Yes.
It's not going to catch much resin because most of the time it's going to be a hollow cup.
Yeah.
But that last little bit is going to get some
in there, and you got to be watching out for it. Secondarily, though, back to I didn't put the hole. I did this with a great unclean proxy, great unclean one. And so at least when he cracked and the goo began to flow out of him, it was a puddle around an Agent of Nurgle, and I had a big like glistening pile. And he was made out of my soup. Like the leftover dregs of like 3 different colors. So it was this greenish gray. I was like, that is so on brand. I almost don't want to clean that up.
That's when you just get your UV flashlight and cook that sucker.
Right. So staying on theme for this particular line of failure, resin likes to be warmish.
Yeah.
But not too warmish, and definitely not cold.
No. The correct temperature to print your resin is somewhere above 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And as far as proper temperatures from countries not quite as insane as ours, I don't know what that number is.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, it's not actually as cold as I thought it would be tonight. It's 29 degrees. But that was my first year. My printer was in that garage in that 29 degree weather, and I was suddenly starting getting the weirdest fails. And I was like, what is going on? And I get so mad, and I'd be like, I'd check everything. I'd check light exposure and all this stuff. And finally someone's like, did you just say you were printing in your garage? And I was like, and I don't think it was you. I think it was somebody else at a maker's thing. I was like, yeah, I'm printing in my garage. And he's like, is it heated? I'm like, well, you get some house from the, heat from the house, whatever. And I checked it. It was like, yeah, it was like 38 degrees. And he's like, so it's barely above freezing and you're using liquid resin in there? And I was like, yeah. And he's like,
No, it will not chemically react efficiently enough to print successfully.
Yeah. And you can get a heated vat. You can do solutions. You can put things inside your print if you have a hood or whatever.
There's chamber heaters. A lot of printers these days are coming with printer heaters built in.
Yeah. But this one little thing, and this goes for FDM too, getting the right temperatures at the right thing for your material, super critical. And you can think you're doing so many other things wrong, and the temperature is going to kill you, and this will also dovetail very nicely into your resin does get too old.
Yes, it does.
I fought this tooth and nail. I fought it. And I still occasionally will just be like, I have a good print set up. I wouldn't mind another 10. Let's just throw some soup in there and see what happens, because I don't really care if it fails. And I still get away with it sometimes. I don't always. And there's an issue. Like what'll sometimes happen if you get some weird separation from the aging process, for instance, you'll get that film that's at the certain layer height. And when you finally get your plate doing the right thing, it hits that layer height and you just get this whole layer where it fails. And it just looks like someone sliced your print in half. And that's assuming it just doesn't have, other quality issues where like it's just brittle or crumbly. That's another thing you can get with old resin is a crumbly texture that's not going to be good for pretty much any use, honestly. And so there comes a time you just let it go. You just let it go. And if you've yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
So I was just gonna if you've lost the momentum in your hobby, there might be a time to come and just reset, right? Like we just say, let's clean out my whole crafting area. Let's take anything that has even remotely a chance of expiring and just gut it, right?
Most reputable brands will print expiration dates on the resin. They're usually fairly accurate. Pay attention to them.
Mm-hmm.
This is also a reason that don't stock up on resin if you don't see yourself using it within that time frame.
This is where I hide.
Like we've been talking about here, like some of these crazy Sunloose sales over Black Friday, where it's like, wow, you can get resin for $8 a bottle if you just buy 30 of them.
Kane's saying that I'm a hoarder, and maybe a little, Kane. It's true.
Yeah. And if you're running a print farm, sure, that makes sense. But if you're only printing like 8 or 10 miniatures a week for your D&D game, that's not a smart purchase.
Right. Or you're not just like really ready to go. Like for me, like planning these big campaigns, like I eventually want to do a big Ixalan D&D game. When I do that, yes, I'm going to get the big case. I'm going to print everything I can. I mean, and I at this point, and I think this is a good strategy to take your buys with your minis and get yourself organized first and just be ready to go, right? Go. Because you're going to want to do that as fast as possible. And then you're going to want a good storage solution. But we're going to recount my debacle from a couple weeks ago in a second.
In a related note,
yes,
sometimes the resin you order, even from a reputable brand, they would have had a bad batch. Like this drove me nuts when I ordered some Elegoo resin once, and I got some bad goo, which is like
very true.
I'm following the instructions, and that's another thing related to this. Every single resin has its own unique settings, and there's lots of good guides online for look it up, but ultimately for your specific printer, like even two of the same printer will be slightly different from each other, right? So like you do want to do like calibration prints when you're adjusting to a new type of resin. But even in that, you could just end up with a bad batch, which is why if you're trying a new thing of resin, get a bottle or two of it, use it and test it, then decide if you're going to
buy the case. Right. Yeah.
If don't buy a case of resin you've never tested before, because first you might not like it. But every single resin's got different properties. Some of them are tougher, some of them are brittle.
Some of them
like
stink.
Quote unquote is vastly different across brands. Like Elegoo stuff is almost good enough as it is, but Sunloose is brittle without enough tenacious in there, even though they both say they're ABS like.
The new Sunloose actually been pretty good.
I meant to say Soraya Tech because Sunloose actually been pretty good.
Yeah, Sunloose actually been great. Soraya Tech can be exceptionally brittle though without tenacious, for sure.
Which is and Soraya Tech non-ABS like prints super crisp, but you better not breathe on that spear.
Yeah, right. Especially their translucents. Gorgeous.
And there's sometimes you want that. If all you want is a display piece that's never going to be handled and sit on the shelf, then you want the sculpting resin with the super high accuracy.
Yeah.
That's all good stuff. But like anything you're going to play with, you're going to need to learn it. So just accept that sometimes it's not going to be your fault.
Right.
But you know what is your fault?
Because
you mentioned the print fail, where you said it looks like it just stopped printing in a layer, and that can be because of temperature or bad resin can cause that. But that's not the most common cause of that.
Which one do you think it is?
The most common cause of you showed up at your print and it's just sheared off as if it just stopped printing halfway through. You didn't clean your printer.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, your Z-axis.
You have to clean your printer.
True.
The Z-axis especially needs to be greased on the regular and cleaned on the regular, or it'll gunk up, and it will eventually gunk up enough that the motor is going to have a hard time turning it, and so it'll think it's lowering down to the bed plate, and it just won't make it all the way there.
It'll just flash and fry. And then you also have a layer of cured resin on the bottom, and
you got a pancake on your screen, and a print that just looks like it stopped at the dragon's belly and never went any further.
It's true. Very true.
Yeah, that's so what you're going to want to do there is some of the things you're going to want to get in your kit is, some nice little stiff cleaning brushes to clean your Z screw.
Mhm.
You're going to want to get some nice grease that's good for the thing. I use PTFE lube myself. I know that that's not technically the best choice, but it's not a bad choice.
Yeah, there's a lot of great options out there,
Yeah.
and they're all
Yeah.
cheap too.
And about once a month, I get in there and clean it.
I probably need to do it more like that. I think I'm probably every like 2 or 3 months. But I should
after
probably do
after about 4 months is when you can run into problems if you're just
Uh-oh.
But here's the thing:
Did we
is
lose
it
Param?
can eventually cause bad problems.
You froze for a second, but you're good now.
Yeah, it can eventually cause bad problems, and you might run. And if you don't clean your printer enough, it could end up damaging your printer long term.
Oh yeah,
You'll burn the motor out. Or worse, it won't go up when it thought it went up. And then it'll go down a lot more than it went down and crush your screen.
Okay, yeah, and that's bad. You want a terrifying noise. Start to hear it like cracking against your print bed. Not good.
Yeah. I guess. The other big, humongous, gigantic fail I made once, and the FL everybody needs to worry out for is making sure that your vat filled with liquid that you can't see inside is actually clean inside before you hit print.
Oh yes.
I had lost my plastic spatula and had fallen into the vat.
Oh no, that's even worse than what I did.
And I said, and then I just started hearing grind, crunch, crack. And immediately ran for the power switch and backed that thing off after I turned it back on. Thankfully, no long-term damage, but that could have easily been my worst day with a printer.
Yeah,
you need to check your vat for print fails every single print. And you need to don't print if there's anything in that vat.
Yeah, for me, it was the first time I was like popping something off above it, and I was so happy that the print bed thing came off clean. I was like, I had my gloves on. I thought it was pretty good. It had hung and like the drips had all come off. It was pretty good shape, but I missed the fact that one little raft stack had snapped off and fallen in there.
Oh no.
And so it crushed it. Fortunately, it didn't damage the print bed, but it did crush that thing flat. And then, of course, that causes the whole next print job to fail.
Yeah. Humongous vouch.
I feel like we're talking a lot about resin, and that's my general go-to. But let's look at some FDM fails.
FDM fails are interesting.
They are, and
they're depending on how the stars are aligned. You can get an FDM fail.
Right. For me, of course, the infamous one is the shaky table. I had no idea. Comet Lord says way too many of these stories sound familiar. Yes, they do. Comet Lord. Speaking of which, Comet Lord is an amazing creator. You should go check out the website and just follow them. They're fantastic. Scott,
some of the most glorious miniatures that have ever been created.
Yes, and
honestly,
they itch all my right tentacle alien horror spots and stuff. So.
All my cool sword boys.
Yeah. Well, and anything psionic, if you want like psionic, like classic monsters, lots of stuff in that wheelhouse as well. But yeah, FDM shaky table. Wow, like such a horror show. The stilted, half lined up stuff. Eventually, things getting knocked over and hitting into each other, and just such a bad thing. And I was just at my wit's end, and finally, I was like, wait a second. I'm watching the print go, and the whole table is just jerking around. And I was like, of course, I should have known that, right? It was it was my Photon, Photon X. Was
you don't go small.
Mega
you
X.
Jumped into FDM printing with a monster.
Yeah, with a Mega X, which also my first one was totally not my problem. It was broken. And so like sometimes you do have to figure out that in fact, it's just a bad printer, right? Like, for the longest time, because I pounded my head against my resin printers for so long, I just assumed my FDM, it's user error. I did a bad thing, whatever. No, sometimes you can just get bad tech, especially with this stuff because you build from kits and stuff like that. And so like you're really going to question yourself. Did I assemble this wrong? Did I do whatever? This particular thing, no, it was just a big boy and like it needs to be very precise, and it just couldn't. The first one, it didn't work at all. But the second time, it was totally my fault for putting it on an unstable surface.
Well, this goes back to like any longtime listeners with the podcast will remember when I got my Neptune 3 and I got the first like guinea pig batches of my Neptune 3, um, thinking bad printers, uh, you need to update those firmwares. Like if you get any printer, one of the first things you should do is just go check and see if there's updated firmware for your printer. Because the fail I was running into is that very first batch that went out the door with bad firmware, you would do the mesh bed leveling because it was one of the first printers I got that had built-in mesh bed leveling. Because leveling the bed, your bed being unlevel, is the number one cause of failures for FDM printing. Just straight up.
Amen.
Yeah. So having a printer that'll level a bed for you, oh my gosh, I'll print so many things. And I would level the bed and it would print perfectly. And I would be great. Give me another one. Because I was doing like a lot of batch printing where I needed like a whole lot of the same part. I was like, great, give me another one. Fail.
Yeah.
Because the firmware would not adjust would just basically get it wrong on the second print. So you'd have to level it manually between every single print. And of course they fixed that like literally a week later. Before I even did my first print, even the firmware was available. I just needed to go to the dang website, download it, and install it. And then since I did that Neptune 3 has given me nothing but perfect prints.
Nice. Yeah, and as a second follow-up to the unleveled print bed, the next thing I'm going to say is particular with FDM, only with FDM really, temperature distribution on your build plate. If your temperature is inconsistent, you're going to get warps. You're going to get things that pop off. You know, we've talked about using glue sticks and hairspray to kind of combat it, but it definitely, if you get that, especially like to keep my Mega X even-ish, I have to get it really warm. And that means if my PLA is too soft, I'm going to get warping, which then causes them to pop off and then they fail for a different reason. So you kind of got to find your sweet spot of like what that heat level looks like to keep things, you know, adhered, but you also need it not too hot so that it doesn't pop off. And I think we've talked about this one before on the show, Cast and Play's entire Royal Castle ballroom set.
Oh.
And this was
lovely set.
Yeah, just gorgeous stuff. And it printed so well. And it got all the way up to the last tier, the last banister lines on the tops of all of them. And the heat started, it was so far away, it got cool and stuff started popping off. And of course the print had drug them into each other.
It's so fun to watch a failed print in progress because a lot of people do time lapses and you'll just see the printer and it's just like, wow.
It was like a crash car derby. They were just smashing into each other, knocking all over the place. And then eventually I just had this one kind of dangling, hanging off, spinning around, and all the rest of them were knocked off onto the floor even. Like it was, this was a bad scene. It looked like the fall of, you know, some ancient empire being destroyed right before my eyes. So
with resin printing, you get fails of, why is there only half a thing here? Or why did the dude not have a leg? Or I have a pancake in my vat, and you only find out about it later because it all happens in the dark where you usually can't get a good eye on it. With FDM printer, it's a fireworks show. But he's mentioned temperature. It's not just the temperature of the bed you need to worry about. It's the temperature of the environment around it.
Sure.
One of my earliest Neptune 2 / Ender 3 days failures, I realized that I didn't put 2 and 2 together, but it was like sometimes I would get perfect prints and sometimes like the buildings would like peel away the corners and pop off the build plate early and I'd have problems. And it was if I left the door to the room open and a draft came in near the printer and that caused that side to cool down rapidly, which over the course of a print made it pop off. And I realized that I can only print in this if I am very careful and keep the door closed. And if I enter and exit the room, I need to do so slowly so I don't cause a big old draft to cause me problems.
Right. And this goes too if you are using outside ventilation. If the air is specifically hot or cold, if you're using that, you're going to change the environment of your print area. So you got to be careful.
If you have a hard time for keeping your printers warm or both for resin and FDM, look into getting a printer enclosure. You can get them fairly cheap online. It's basically a big old grow tent that you put around your printer that some of them will have like little ventilation hoses that you can hook up to an extraction fan. It's not a life I choose to lead, but it can solve a lot of problems.
Sure. Especially like with your resin, I would say less
Mhm.
less important, but still possibly important, especially if you're like pets or kids
It's
in your house.
super important for FDM if you're going to print some of the toxic filaments.
Okay, if you're
PLA's
using
fine, but if you're
PL's
using
fine.
ABS,
Yeah, okay, fair. That's
you
fair.
need to
You
not be
want
in the room with
ventilation for that,
ABS.
for sure.
Mhm.
Last thing I would say about FDM though is don't try to apply resin printing logic to your FDM printer, and don't try to do the counter, right? So in resin printing, we've talked about on the show before, you're going at the same speed. So loading up that build plate is productivity. More is more. Let's go. Let's put all the shit on
Mhm.
it and just get that big, like, whole army's worth of soldiers out.
Yes.
And it's such
I
a
want
satisfying
20
moment.
spearmen tomorrow.
You are threatening the gods themselves if you try that with your FDM printer. And you're going to pay,
I'm going to
because
put 30 dungeon tiles on my Ender 3.
no, don't do it. Don't
Because
do
it
it.
takes 30 times as much as wrong, and you have 30 times the risk that all 30 of them are going to ruin. Whereas if you just did
Exactly.
them one at a time, you'd still get them at the same amount of time that you spent printing and much less risk. Because
Yep.
if one of them failed, it just took that
The
one out
one,
with it. It
and
didn't
you're not
take
getting
30
the
of them with it.
full pile of spaghetti like I have numerous times. Yeah. Don't do it that way.
And like we talked with resin, when you're printing with filament printers, each filament needs different settings. Learn what those are and look on. It's a little less intense there. Like
Mhm.
unless you're dealing with specialized stuff, a PLA is usually a PLA unless it has like some sort of additive in it.
Mhm.
Especially if it's from the same brand, so a red and a green and a blue won't really matter much to the printer.
Right.
Which is not true with resin, where a black takes different settings than a white.
Sometimes, depending on the brand. But yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. I'm gonna segue into another one here, because we're
Mhm.
talking about a whole bunch of fails. But if you get a success and
Mhm.
lots of successes, there is a different kind of mistake you can make.
Oh.
Which is, you got too much stuff coming off it. You don't have the proper plan to store it. You don't have the proper plan to make time to paint it. And you feel bad about your 40K pile of gray shame in your closet. Wait till you have 3 or 4 full boxes of fragile unpainted resin that is gorgeous, but you're not managing it well. That is its own nightmare, for
And here's
sure.
the thing. It's going to stay in that bin long enough for you to find a better version of it that somebody else made 8 months later.
Right.
And then you're going to print that better version of it because you got excited about the new Ooh Pretty. And let's say optimistically that you do paint the new Ooh Pretty, but that means you've just got a whole bottle full of wood elves that are going in the garbage.
Right. And if you end up paint, what is that? Yeah, exactly. You're going to have to make that time to deal with it, to properly paint it, properly store it, or you're going to end up with this. You're going to have, I have that butterfly Eldar army that I started, and it's super cool. And I have, my painted squad, so I could use it in like a skirmish game. But the rest of it, the half finished tank that I just knew I was going to get that other plate done eventually. No, it doesn't have its turret on it. It's just becoming this pile of like sci-fi garbage that just needs to go away, right? It just needs to go away. And I think you're nailing it in one. The chances are by the time that I do it, it's like, the Arcadian Elves coming out. I still have my original Arcadian Elves set from Heroes Infinite because it's kind of almost a collectible thing now, that I still keep those files. But like, yeah, now there's like 2 other sets since then, right? And the redos of the original figures and everything. So like, I have almost so many options. If I go back and print that now, I'm probably not going to start with that old set, right? Maybe I would.
So be realistic about what you're actually going to need when you print, because you just got the new toy that will make everything you ever wanted, and you are used to the whole miniatures are expensive and hard to get, and now they're cheap and instantaneous and in giant quantities. It is super easy to overdo it. And so you need to embrace 2 things, one of which Kristen disagrees vehemently on, and one is to only print what you need, and the second is be willing to let go of printed stuff that you are no longer needing. You need to be willing to reach out.
Willing to let go. Yeah. That's
Take
not
one
exactly
of your rat boys that you haven't painted yet.
Don't do it.
And then just drop it in the trash.
Still makes me sad, Barum.
I got a whole bucket full of spearmen that was like from month 1 of print I found the other day, and their line tower spear. They've got this humongous Discworld vibe to the crew, and I love them, but I don't have a space for them. I don't have a plan for them, and they're some of my earliest prints, so they're not as good looking as my new prints because I was new and dumb, and I had a Mars, and I was overcooking my prints, and
Right.
yeah, they're not great looking. So you know where they're going.
To the game store. You're going to donate them to the
No.
game store.
I don't have a license for that.
No. Okay. That's true. That's true. You could, though, write the creator and say, hey, I have this army. Would you give me permission to donate it?
I'm pretty sure Dan would if I asked him nicely, but I'm just gonna throw them away.
Because there are starving gamers in disadvantaged positions that need those minis. Okay. I know. I have a problem. It's fine.
There are plenty of free to print license free minis out there in the world that if I ever run into a starving gamer that needs a collection, I can hook them up.
Sure. Or you just buy the merchant license for that month that you want to print off and go nuts.
Yeah, sure.
Because you're getting to set your resale price. It could be $0.
Man, merchant licenses aren't expensive. They're like $30.
No, right. Very reasonable.
That's nothing.
That is something, if you don't know this about the industry, you have to usually buy them by month or by Kickstarter.
Right.
But oftentimes, like a lifetime merchant license for an amazing set of minis is like $200 on Kickstarter. So if you want to be the guy who's like at the con selling minis, you could probably spend maybe a grand or two and have a formidable array of sellable minis very quickly. So there's that. I'm trying to think if there's any other horror stories I had. I mean, there's the car, but that's more of a storage situation.
Yeah, get some storage, people. There's lots of great videos out there on like how to efficiently store your minis and stuff like that. I like the letter shelf solution.
Yep.
Do you use the letter shelf solution?
Yeah, the one you did with the sliders from. Yeah, I have quite a bit of that. I haven't finished magnetizing everything, but so I'm about halfway through my old, because I used to use tackle boxes. And then I was going to do Goobertown's metal sheets. I was going to do that. I like
I've done
that
and it works really good. Also, the brownie pan method, where you buy the really thick brownie pans with like the big dome that like has like 4 inches of clearance on the inside. No need to glue a sheet to that.
Yeah, I got some of those, but I just didn't like them. I didn't like how they stacked. I don't know. I was trying, because they were nice and square, so they fit in your IKEA standard cubicle things just fine. I still think the letters are the letter shelves are probably the best one I've seen, though. I do wish, because I got the weave, the metal weave, and the magnetic adhesion isn't super great, but it's still there.
Yeah. Oh, and they're starting to sell like really cheap. So like as this has become popular, like I bought a younger sibling one of the Amazon $70 cases for Christmas.
Right.
Great. Like it's pre-made wood with like sliding metal shelves in it. Works fantastic. Stores like 400 minis.
And is that for like a travel army situation?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that for sure. I certainly could have used it the other day, because I was taking stuff in cardboard boxes. Duh. Just such a bad idea. Such a bad idea.
And if you got more money than sense, and or a case that was given to you, you can go with the Battle Foam metal magnetic cases, and it sure looks real nice. And I like rocking up with that at the game store.
Yeah.
But it is like a $300 investment.
Yeah, I was about to say I was actually going to lowball that, so that's even more than I thought it was. Yikes.
Are you ready to talk about shout outs?
Yeah, except for I'm not sure I have any. Do you?
I have 2. I have 2.
All right.
Technically 3, because one of them is the same concept from 2 different vendors.
I mean, I could bring up something, since you probably won't.
Okay, what's that?
OPR has a really adorable little lizard guy.
Oh yeah, we did do that.
You should show it off, because it's amazing. Since it's your company, I know you might feel awkward about it, but I'm a patron of OPR, I am not the president,
All
but
right,
I am
all right.
a customer. Anyway.
Okay, so Secret Tixall, the narrative campaign, is coming out, and it's the first time that OPR is going to actually make some named hero miniatures. Some caveats that we've announced is they are named heroes, but they're built using the same rules as all the other heroes, so they're not going to be overpowered. Actually, they're kind of on the weaker side of things, some of them stat-wise, but not
they
all
are
of them.
adorable.
But they will have these are specific characters for the campaign, and we're showing off 2 of them for the first time today, and that is Tika and Ignacio for Secrets of Tishel. And we've got the art showing off for Tika, and they're both adorable nerds. And then we're showing off the mini of Tika, who is absolutely like the artist just knocked this.
Who
out
doesn't want to
park.
play that in a D&D game? I'm just saying, that is for a war game, and I know it's a hero figure, but I look at that and I think that is a kobold wizard or sorcerer if I have ever seen one.
Yeah,
freaking
it's
fantastic.
Like really timid and like big eyes, and it's just like way in over his head. And then there's Ignacio, who is Ignacio, or I'm going to screw up the pronunciation, who is just like every bit the prim and proper nerd you think they are. And I'm really just happy with how much personality that these sculpts had into it. So really hype. So I do work for OPR. I did work directly on this product. I actually
hence why I brought this up.
Off.
That's why I brought it up, because I think it's awesome and I think it deserves to be showed off.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to shout out to. So we kind of poked fun at it a little bit earlier that, hey, maybe you're interested in some old world style miniatures right now. And yes, there's a lot of people that are releasing as happens anytime something gets popular from the G-dubs. A lot of people want to create alternatives out there because they're popular. You release the cool thing that's popular. But I want to shout out to 2 of the companies that have been doing my Bretonnia boys the best for the longest. And that is, if you want that old, and specifically if you want that old school look that looks like it belongs in 1997, but more importantly, looks like you think 1997 looked, not how it actually looked.
Right.
And 2 companies do that really great. And one of which is, of course, I'm going to Highland Miniatures. They just, oopsie, wrong one. That's Tixel still. Highland Miniatures, their Galea line. If you want some King Arthur knights with flying Pegasuses, they have everything you could ever hope for. They look amazing. And if you get their Patreon, you can get these at super cheap prices. And for less than $100, you can have as many naughty peasanty people as you want.
Okay.
And under a similar vein, if you really, really, really love that old hammer look, if you really love that old hammer look, okay,
great.
Monstrous Encounters put together a bundle of all of their models for this project.
Oh, okay.
And that they've ever made. It's $140 retail, but again, join their Patreon and get the discount code, like we talked about in the previous episode.
Yes. Always do that.
And it's their Britain army. And it is every model you could ever want. And these definitely harken way back more towards that old school style. Again, these are actually much, much better than they actually looked back then. But this is definitely how I remembered they looked. But the brittle isn't actually a Lego block this time around. I've printed out lots of these. They print out very nicely, and they did a great job. And that'd be a whole lot of dollars and ponies if you were buying physical.
So I don't know if you saw that. Kane says that the link's not coming up on the website to the podcast. And I am actually just getting when I do the little hamburger thing, I'm just getting a little X graphic. So that's something we might want to look at.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It might just be the mobile view.
What's not coming up?
Just there's the links to the Spotify and the iTunes and stuff.
Oh, we'll have to figure that out later. I can't do it
We-
live on air.
Oh, I know. Just to get brought up, and it was a little concerning, so I just figured I'd mention it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you kindly. All right. So, anything else you want to chat about? Shout out to?
No. I did see Epic has a new Frontier that's pretty cool looking if you like big, crazy,
Ooh.
customizable dragon stuff. But
Like
other than that, I mean, that's just going to be on the front page of the Frontiers page. So I'm not necessarily saying that needs a shout out. But they do nice customizable stuff that you can do some modularity with. So that's it for me, though. Anything last from you? You said you had two, I thought.
I decided not to shout out the other one.
Oh, okay.
Because it's awesome. I'll show it off. It's awesome. This is pricey, but it looks awesome.
It looks awesome. We'll see.
That is this freaking cool. I don't like dice towers, but a dice tower that is a dragon that literally breathes your dice out.
That's pretty neat.
It's just really great job. It is. I was looking at the earliest play, like the early pledge to get it's like 50 USD. So that's kind of expensive for a single 3D print model, but it is really awesome 3D print model.
It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. I'm wondering how that because it almost looks like spring loaded, but I'm sure
this has probably got a lot of engineering involved into it, and people should definitely get paid for their work.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, is it? Like the second I saw the animation, I'm just like,
yeah, it's pretty extra. It's pretty extra. Kind of like it.
Like speaking of, I don't know if the merchant license is commercial license is 200 USD.
Wow.
That would I can see this succeeding at conventions as a popular item.
Well, that is pretty neat. I'm glad you showed it anyway.
Yeah. All right, everybody. If you want to find more of our show, you can find it at printyourgames.com. We hope. I need to figure out what's going on there.
Right. I'm a little nervous about that suddenly.
And until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Parent.
I'm Kristen Sowers, also known as Seventh Mastery, and don't forget to use your screen protector.